All right, let's just jump right in. Companies, right now, are spending trillions, with a T, on these big transformation efforts. But for most of them, something is just fundamentally broken. So today, we're going to explore a totally new way of thinking about how organizations work, moving from this rigid, kind of mechanical past to a future that's a whole lot smarter and way more adaptive.
And when I say broken, I really mean it. Get this number in your head, 12%. That's it. That is the percentage of large-scale transformations that actually create lasting, real performance gains. So for every 8 companies that try, only about 1 actually succeeds. This isn't a small problem, you guys. This is a systemic failure. So, what's the deal? Why are so many of these well-funded, well-intentioned efforts just falling flat? It's not for a lack of trying, that's for sure. The problem is that the basic model for how we build and run our companies is completely stuck in the past.
To really get it, we need to look at the model that's still so dominant today, and we're going to call it the Tin Man Organization. And yeah, just like in The Wizard of Oz, a lot of these organizations are basically rusted solid.
The Tin Man Organization was perfected for the era of mass production. It's a machine, built for efficiency, predictability, and top-down control. Think clear hierarchies, super strict processes, and the #1 rule, minimize risk at all costs. It was actually great for its time, but in the world we live in now, that rigidity just makes it slow, clumsy, and totally unable to react to change without some big outside fix.
So, if the Tin Man is the problem, what's the solution? Well, let's meet our new hero, the Octopus Organization. It's inspired by that incredibly adaptive, curious, and frankly brilliant creature, and he gives us a model for companies that can really thrive in a world of constant, non-stop change.
To really understand this shift, you gotta see the difference between 2 types of environments. Tin Man orgs were built for a complicated world. Think of a jet engine. Tons of parts, but it's knowable, it's predictable. But we now live in a complex world. And that's more like the ocean. It's unpredictable, it's always changing. You can't control the ocean, right? You have to sense the currents and adapt to them.
So let's see how this actually plays out in our day-to-day. In a Tin Man company, a meeting is where you go to consume pre-packaged information from a slide deck. The agenda is locked, questions are for the end, don't rock the boat. But in an Octopus Organization, a meeting is where ideas are born. It's a dynamic, creative space with different voices, whiteboards everywhere, and a real willingness to chase those unexpected tangents. And this idea goes all the way to the front lines. A Tin Man call center agent is basically a process executor. They're rewarded for how fast they can get through a call and for sticking to the script, word for word. But an Octopus agent? They own the customer's problem. They have the freedom and the authority to find the right solution, which turns them from just a problem solver into an innovator who's actually making the entire company better for the customer. And what about innovation? Oh, the Tin Man loves to wall that off in a special innovation lab, where brilliant ideas are cooked up in a vacuum and then kind of thrown over the fence to the business to figure out. The Octopus knows that's crazy. It knows innovation is everyone's job. It's a distributed capability, driven by small, empowered teams who are just obsessed with solving real customer problems every single day. But, okay, does this new model actually work? I mean, is it just a nice idea? The data is crystal clear. Companies that operate with this customer-obsessed, octopus-like mindset aren't just nicer places to work, they are 3 times more likely to lead their industries in revenue growth, and, get this, they achieve profitability premiums of around 23% over their Tin Man competitors. Now, whenever leaders hear this, they always ask for the step-by-step playbook. Just give me the checklist. But see, that's a Tin Man question. Becoming an octopus isn't about following some rigid blueprint. It's about a deep, fundamental shift in your mindset. And that shift is guided by 3 core principles.
Okay, first, make changes with people, not to them. This is all about tapping into the collective brainpower of the people closest to the actual problems, because guess what? They almost always know the solution. Second, learning and impact have to be completely intertwined. Every little experiment should create either real business value or a really valuable insight. And third, and this is a big one, resist the urge to add more process. Instead, always be asking, what can we take away? It's about subtraction to achieve more.
Okay, so that's the mindset, but how do you actually start putting this into practice? Let's get into a really practical guide for making this change happen. And it all starts with spotting what's holding you back right now.
So the journey begins by learning to spot what are called anti-patterns. These are those predictable, almost conditioned mistakes that companies make over and over again. They're the go-to formulaic responses that, even with the best intentions, just consistently end up making things worse.
Most of these really damaging anti-patterns fall into three main buckets. First, you've got behaviors that compromise clarity, where nobody really knows why they're doing what they're doing. Second, and this is huge, are behaviors that undermine ownership, making people feel like they're just a cog in a giant machine. Research actually puts the cost of this lost human potential at $8.9 trillion in lost productivity. And finally, behaviors that just stifle curiosity, like needing 5 levels of approval for one tiny experiment, which kills the very engine of adaptation.
So once you spot an anti-pattern, you can start to tackle it with a really simple learning loop. First, you hypothesize. Come up with an idea about what might work better. Second, you run a small experiment. You could just stop doing something, or deviate from a process, or pilot a totally new practice. And then finally, and this is key, you reflect. You look not just at the result, but at the underlying assumptions you had going in.
That reflection step is absolutely the most critical part. You know, the U.S. Army's after-action review is a masterclass in this stuff. They don't just ask what happened, they force a deeper question. Why did this seem like the best option at the time? That deeper inquiry, it moves you beyond just fixing one little mistake to actually improving the entire system by questioning your core beliefs and strategies.
Okay, so what happens after a successful experiment? The typical corporate impulse is to scale it, right? A big top-down mandate for everyone to do the new thing. But Octopus orgs don't scale, they spread. They create the conditions for good ideas to get pulled organically from one team to another, adapted to fit what each team actually needs. Think about it like a useful tool that one developer builds that just gets adopted by others because it works. That's spreaded.
All of this, it leads to a really profound shift in what it even means to be a leader. Embracing this octopus model is less about learning a bunch of new skills and more about unlearning a whole career's worth of old, ingrained habits.
You see, in the old model, the leader is a chess master, right? They're controlling every single piece on the board. In the octopus model, the leader is more like a system architect, or maybe even a gardener. They aren't directing every single move. Their whole focus is on creating the environment, the soil, the light, the right conditions for their team to thrive all on their own.
Ultimately, a leader's job has to shift from working in the system, directing tasks, micromanaging, to working on the system. That means their job is to remove friction, to clarify purpose, and to make sure ownership is absolutely clear. That is the ultimate act of enabling your team.
Which, of course, brings us to you. This isn't just some abstract theory, it's a practical challenge. I want you to look at the way your team works. Think about your meetings, your processes, your approval chains. What is one 10-man habit? One small, rigid thing that you could maybe experiment with changing tomorrow?